And we're going to be talking about eToro, a prominent platform widely used for investing and clearly known worldwide. Now I'm going to show you different points from my perspective, but I'll also be talking to you about how you can analyze this type of platform. We've already analyzed XTB, and an analysis on interactive brokers is coming soon. We're analyzing all brokers, so you know what you need to know about each, what they don't usually tell you, because everything is always discussed superficially, not truly explored in depth. So let's start by saying that this platform is one of the oldest when it comes to stock market investing, and it's one of the, let's say, most traditional in terms of ease of use. This platform, from the moment it was created, was literally designed with the goal of being very easy to use. That's why you see so many people talking about eToro, because it's very easy to use even for people who know nothing about the stock market and are just getting started. Now, what you can always do with these kinds of platforms and entities is scroll down to where it says Trustpilot. For some reason, they always have a page on Trustpilot for reviews. So you need to go in and obviously check how things are going for other people. However, you will never ever find any broker, any platform, any site of this kind that doesn't have a negative rating. There will always be someone who had a bad experience, because that's just obvious. In fact, it says right here, it has 35 million users. Obviously, with 35 million users, there are going to be problems. And I'm not saying this to defend this platform, I'm saying it in general. When you go to a restaurant in your daily life and look at its reviews, there will always be both negative and positive opinions. But don't expect to always find a 5, for example, here, or a 4.9 that's nearly perfect on any site, because you'll never find that it will always be a little lower, and that's just how it is. The ones that are really bad, the investment platform, usually have a score of 2.8, 2.7, because there are far more reviews from people who had a bad experience than from those who had a good one. In this case, as for eToro, it stands out because it has a 4.1, 4 stars, and considering the number of users, that's actually pretty good. Now, let's go in here and take a look at the platform itself. As we can see, this is the interface. We have a platform on the website that is completely easy to use, understandable, and user-friendly, and we also have a mobile app that works the same way on your phone. But it's also important to understand that for those who want to go a bit further and use more advanced features, eToro really isn't for that type of person. eToro doesn't have such advanced tools when it comes to investing. At that point, you might want to look at something like interactive brokers, or even XTB could be an option. But eToro is designed for investing in a very easy, basic, and straightforward way. Now, on eToro, we find a lot of different ways to invest. We have many ETFs, and we even have indices available through CFDs. We have access to many stock exchanges. In fact, it says right here, 20 stock exchanges and also cryptocurrencies. Personally, I don't recommend investing in cryptocurrencies through eToro. It's actually quite expensive compared to a traditional exchange. So I would suggest that you look for crypto elsewhere, use another platform for that. Don't use eToro to invest in cryptocurrencies. But when it comes to the stock market and all that, it's really great. And also, this isn't just about eToro, but in general, if the platform lets you use leverage, don't do it. Leverage can be very useful, but only for those who really understand it, and even people who know how to use leverage often end up losing money. So it's better not to use this option, and also, well, it depends on the regulations we have, which is something I'll explain to you later. Then, on eToro, there's something really good, which is that just as I mentioned that it was created to be an easy-to-use platform, it was also designed to be a social investing platform. What does this mean? It's like a social network like Facebook, but for investing where you can follow other people. I've already explained this like 20,000 times. If you don't fully understand, please go to my channel and look for Más Finanzas Copy Trading, and there you'll certainly find how to use this, how this copy trading thing truly works. But in short, for example, this particular person who appears here, if I want to copy their portfolio and copy their moves, if that person invests 20% of their portfolio in Nvidia, for example, then 20% of my portfolio will also be invested in whatever they invested in this specific case, Nvidia, and so on and so forth. And this is very useful for people who don't want to worry about investing direct blood, that's in quotes. Because you do have to worry, obviously, when you're following someone else's moves, even if it's done automatically and you don't have to do anything at all. Not everyone is perfect, or rather, no one is perfect when it comes to investing. And so when you're investing, it could happen that the person you're following starts making bad decisions, their performance keeps going downhill, and you end up losing all your money. So it really is advisable to keep an eye on things. But anyway, this is the platform that was created with the concept of copy trading, and in my opinion, it's the one that has developed this concept the most. In other words, it's the one where you can invest the most in this way, where you can copy portfolios the most. Obviously, there are also other exchanges in the case of crypto or other brokers that also have this particular feature, but I truly feel like here you can find everything, all kinds of investors. I mean, it's not just focused on one type of sector. There are people who invest for the long term, people who have different investment goals, and besides, it's very well, how should I put it, sort of balanced. That is, when you're investing through copy trading, what happens is that the person, for example, if I follow her, she will get paid for me following her. So obviously it's in her best interest to do really well so that I'll want to keep following her, and so will other people, so that eToro keeps paying her. And if she has fewer followers, then obviously she'll get paid less. That's why these people also have the goal of achieving very good returns, not just for themselves and their portfolios, but because if they have a strong portfolio and good profits, clearly more people will follow them. The other thing is the topic of education. So on eToro, we find a lot of information. However, until recently, I noticed that almost everything was in English. For Spanish, we hardly find anything, but I recommend that you come here. If you don't have much knowledge about investing, click on Start Learning Now, and here you'll find quite a few things, but within what's available compared to other brokers, it doesn't have that much information, especially in Spanish, that could be useful to us. But in English, yes, it does. So if you know English, that's great, and you can search for it in English, eToro, in English, and there you will find a lot of information. Let's move on to this part. We also have this feature to earn interest, annual interest, but this applies to certain locations, so you need to check. I'm not going to go into much detail about this because, as I said, it's not available everywhere. However, you can come over here to the more information section and carefully check who is truly eligible, who isn't, precisely how you can earn it, what specific balance you need to generate that interest, and so on. Now, once we're on this particular platform, it's also quite important to fully understand everything else that comes with an investment platform, like its core values, for example. Here, it clearly states that it is social, reliable, secure, and truly global. But also, beyond this, we need to talk about deposit amounts and all that. The minimum deposit amount in the vast majority of countries is $200. That's the minimum you can deposit on eToro. But in some countries, and this is something you should check, the minimum amount may be lower. So you need to check within the platform at the time you register what the minimum amount is. But generally, in the vast majority of countries, it's $200. However, once you make that initial significant deposit of $200, all subsequent deposits can be as low as just $50. In other words, the minimum goes down, and in almost all countries, it works the same way. And here you can see sponsorships of soccer teams around the world. The vast majority are soccer teams or from other sports that I honestly don't know much about, but many exchange platforms also have this. Don't be swayed by it, because many platforms that appeared on soccer teams in stadiums have collapsed. In other words, they've turned out to be scams. So this is a good thing because it gives the brand recognition, but it doesn't necessarily mean we should trust them completely. So keep that in mind because it's very important. Now let's scroll down here to the bottom because I want to talk to you about something, and it's this issue right here. We have eToro Europe, there's eToro UK, eToro Seychelles, and so on and so forth. For Latin America, generally speaking, almost all of us will fall under the Seychelles jurisdiction, which was mentioned here. And in fact, there used to be a way where you could say you wanted to change your regulation and you could switch to the UK one, which was the one most people were interested in because, well, it's much better. I'm not saying that in Seychelles you're going to lose all your money because actually, well, they do have some form of regulation in all these places. But obviously, if one of these gets affected, almost all of them would be impacted as a result. So the topic of regulations needs to be handled carefully because sometimes we see brokers regulated in Seychelles and immediately look at them with suspicion. Now, if it's only regulated in Seychelles or the Virgin Islands or similar tax havens, then that's something to worry about. But in the case of eToro, not so much, because we can see that it actually has regulations in Europe and the United Kingdom, which are quite strict when it comes to regulating these types of platforms. And even though for some of us these regulations might not apply, it's important to know that they do have them. Now, you can try it yourself. In fact, I'm going to log into my account here. And as you can see, my account is with eToro UK, eToro United Kingdom. So you can do the same and simply send an email to support. But I've noticed that some people have told me recently that this is no longer possible, that eToro tells them no, that they have to stay in Seychelles or under some other regulatory control. So, well, honestly, it's not a bad thing if you show up there. For example, another one that's quite good is the one in Australia. That's the one I used to be in. The only thing that might really change, and that will matter a lot to you, is the leverage issue. Since in some you'll be able to use leverage and in others you won't. And besides that, there's something else. For example, if I come here and say I want to invest in Nvidia, for instance, I come here and click on invest. In some places, it might tell you that instead of buying shares, you're buying another type of asset. In other words, that you're buying through CFDs, which are not underlying assets. If it shows underlying asset, which is what usually appeared here, it was because you were buying the actual share, just like right now, for example. Here it now shows shares. It doesn't even say underlying asset anymore. Or I don't know if it still appears somewhere around here, but I think it disappeared. Look over here. Actually, I didn't do it. So that's fine. But sometimes when you're investing, it will show you that it's a CFD, which isn't a problem either. But many people are more interested in investing directly through shares. So, well, it's something to keep in mind. Now, if I come over here and, for example, I put that I want 666 shares, for example, notice that regardless of how much I invest, it will show that the commission is $1. So this wasn't there before, but some time ago they added it. Previously, investing in eToro was completely free, but now we have to pay $1, which obviously means we need to calculate more carefully if we're investing very small amounts. Because if, for example, you usually invest $20 at a time, just to give an example, clearly $1 has a significant impact on your investment, so you need to keep that in mind. What I was telling you about the issue of regulation, look, here we are at the leverage section. Here, this appeared like this for me because my account is in the United Kingdom, as I mentioned, but if your account is in another country, it might not even give you the leverage option. It might only show you 1x, or it might show you much higher leverage. This already depends directly on you, but under the regulation I'm under, they don't allow more than 1 to 100 leverage. And now I'm going to show you what I was saying about CFDs. For example, if I search for an index direct, not the ETF like the S&P 500 ETF, but the index itself, this one, notice that obviously there isn't an index you can invest in directly. There are ETFs to invest in indices, but you can't invest in the index itself. And if you look here, it says we're investing in a CFD, which is a contract. The contract is like, think of it this way. You're not actually making the investment in the market itself, meaning you're not investing in the New York Stock Exchange. Instead, what you're doing, for example, in this case, is investing directly in a contract with eToro, where, so to speak, you're betting with eToro and telling them, hey, look, I think this $8,000 position is going to go up. So eToro says, all right. So what happens is that if that position goes up and you make money, then eToro, which is the one directly holding that contract, can, depending on how the investment performs, either pay you money or not. That's basically, it's like a contract. And then what happens with these estimated opening costs is that, well, here it's already a bit more expensive, like $12.03, and also during the day and night hours, because depending on the stock exchange, they might charge you one thing or another. But again, this really depends a lot on the type of investor you are. For example, if we move on to Tesla, we'll see that with Tesla, we have the same thing we had in this case with NVIDIA, and it's just $1. Now let's move on to an ETF, for example, VOO, and let's click here to invest. Here we see that if, for example, we enter $5,000, 50,000, well, dollars, look, here it says order type, market order. And in this case, it's not charging me for opening the ETF. So in this case, there is no fee. This is something you need to check because honestly, I could upload this video now and in 2 months, they might update it. But you just go in and, for example, click invest somewhere and then click this icon that says more information about eToro's commissions. And you have to check how much they charge you, for example, for investing in stocks. Here it says a commission of $1 or $2 may be applied when opening or closing a stock position. So the downside is it's $1 to enter and $1 to exit. That's something not many people tell you either. Then regarding ETFs, notice that they don't charge for that for ETF transactions, which is also really good. And then we have the spread commission, which can be a difference, for example, on platforms where you see market volatility and it shows that the ETF is at $500, but on eToro, it actually shows that it costs $500. So that difference between the market value and the value eToro gives you is something you also need to keep in mind. As for the rest of the commissions, I invite you to check them out yourself because this depends a lot, again, on what you're going to invest in. For example, if you want to invest in crypto, notice that certain commissions also apply and not just directly for the purchase, but also for things like overnight and daytime raffles and several other things like that. So with that said, if you made it to this point in the video, leave a smiley face emoji in the comments so I know who made it to the end of the video and to see who already understands how eToro really works and whether it's worth it for you or not.